Hello, Edward German here. I wanted to take a few moments to talk to you about Anchor FM. I am a first-time podcaster and needed resources to get started. I found this through Anchor FM. Anchor provides a platform to use and will distribute your podcast for free. Not only will it appear on Anchor, but also on other platforms as well, such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many others. It is easy to get started. All you need to do is to download the Anchor app to your computer, smartphone, or tablet. Then get started creating your podcast on Anchor. You can record your podcast right from your computer or smartphone using the app. No other equipment is required. Just use what you already have. Also, you have creator tools that will allow you to edit, add music, and effects for your podcast, all for free. One of the best things about Anchor, aside from being free, is you can make money from podcasting on Anchor with no minimum listenership at all. Everything you need happens right here in one place at anchorf.fm. So go ahead and download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor FM and get started. Hello everyone. I want to introduce you to my brand new podcast, the 1950s Science Fiction Podcast. This show will be all about my favorite sci-fi TV shows, movies, and literature from the decade of the 1950s. Why the 1950s, you ask? Well, I grew up watching sci-fi movies on cable TV growing up during the 70s. Everything from drive-in monster movies to classic A-list films that were streamed in the theaters back in the 50s and syndicated later on. I will talk more about that later. However, with the advent of the internet in the 21st century, I have discovered more gems that I never got to see or never knew about until later. The 1950s was a time when not only the U.S. but the entire world was a different place. It was the early Cold War period. There was above-ground atomic testing, dawn of the television industry, space race started in the latter part of the decade. The science fiction movies were a reflection of the progress science and technology had made during the by the mid-20th century mark. There was also much rapid progress in many facets of American society that it would encourage changes in how we interacted with one another. The civil rights movement started during the decade and continued into the next, thus instituting different perspectives on how we treat our fellow human beings. I do find the 1950s to be a romantic time for science fiction. With so many new technological innovations now manifesting itself, it seems the sky was the limit. There were plenty of space travel stories to dystopic visions of atomic holocaust. There were fears of alien invasions to mutating monsters from radioactive fallout. Hollywood turned out dozens of movies each year from the 50s with the same themes. It was evident in the radio dramas and the new TV programs during the same period as well. Some of the comics had similar ideas running their panels during publication. Some great science fiction writers were working during the decade that created classic science fiction novels such as Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov, and Ray Bradbury. Now I will tell you, the listener, some things about me and what to expect. First, I've been a long-time science fiction fan since I was a young child. At around the age of 8, my father told me the movie The Time Machine was going to be aired on TV that afternoon. I asked him what kind of movie it was. He replied it was a science fiction movie. Then I asked him what science fiction was. He replied, "There are stories based in science but are not real." It was a simple definition, but it got me hooked. After that, I was keen on watching anything listed as science fiction on TV. I had already watched plenty of other shows that on TV that were indeed science fiction, but I was just not aware of the genre until later. This began a lifelong obsession with science fiction. The second thing about me is that I have been an avid podcast listener for over 10 years. I have heard about podcasts. I I have heard about podcasts. I have never owned a, but I've never owned an iPod. I discovered that I could download the podcast after I started listening to iTunes on my laptop computer. There was this show I wanted to hear on anime. I decided to download the episode. At first, I thought it would charge me for the download. However, much to my surprise, the podcasts were free. I started exploring other podcasts that specialize in the same genre and subscribed to the shows. Over the years, I've enjoyed listening to podcasters' contents. But at the t- but I had at the time, I would spend many hours on my laptop listening to multiple programs from sci-fi movies, TV shows, anime, and other topics. It became one of my favorite pastimes. During the past decade, I've seen some podcasters prosper while others have lingered. A few have quit podcasting altogether. I now want to tell you a bit more about the podcast. It will be my very first time as a podcaster. As of right now, I have no experience at this, therefore I am learning as I go along. My podcast will be on the topics I've already mentioned. The podcast episodes will be related to my post for Vocal Media, spelled VOCAL.media. I will post a transcript that will be available on that site once the podcast goes out on the feed. The transcript will include pictures, links, and the podcast itself once approved by vocal staff. The podcast will be a one-person show. I do not have a partner to podcast with, nor will I be conducting interviews of anyone. The frequency of the podcast will vary depending on how fast I can research the topic, personal schedule, and other factors. Hope you will find my podcast to be enjoyable, informative, and entertaining. For feedback, you can message me on Anchor FM or follow me on Twitter at EdwardGerman3. That's spelled at the at symbol, capital E, then lowercase e, capital E, rest is lowercase, WARD, German, capital G, GERMAN, then the letter number 3. Thank you.